The original Worms game is a 2D artillery tactical strategy game that was developed by Team 17 and released in 1995, that originally started off life on the Amiga personal computer, but then would later be ported to many other computers and games consoles. And it is a turn-based strategy game where your combatants are essentially just worms, but with the use of weapons, where you play throughout different types of environments. This concept would become that popular that the Worms series itself has gone on to span multiple different sequels, spin-offs, you name it, upon many different consoles, even up until the current day. So the goal is to literally defeat and obliterate all of your opponents through turn-based combat, utilising a different array of weapons, machinery, nuclear weapons, explosives, guns, anything that you can use at your disposal in order to eradicate the opposing threat. And it's with these elements that it was considered by many to be one of the best and most addictive multiplayer experiences of its time, as it was a lot of great fun to play with your mates. And the game ended up being that popular that it was inevitable to see ports of the game being added to both the Amiga, CD32, Atari Jaguar, Nintendo Game Boy, Macintosh, MS-DOS, the PlayStation, the Sega Mega Drive, even the Sega Saturn and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the SNES. So pretty much every big console that was available during the mid-90s, there was a version of Worms on it, as it was just so addictive and it was just extremely popular. And it's easy to see why it has spanned a legacy that has gone on for well over 20 plus, almost 30 years. And Worms, when it was released, became a commercial and critical success, and it got great reviews pretty much on every platform it was released on. And people just loved the addictive quality and nature of the gameplay, stating that it provided many challenges but yet very challenging and addictive qualities. And the multiplayer aspect of it made it one of its best and most standout features, as you would end up playing for hours upon hours on end, and you could have really good fun in between. Plus you had access to a ton of different levels and environments that you could play through, all with very cool and very quirky graphical cartoony styles that would later be evolved with the evolution of the Worms series. When you move on to the likes of Worms Armageddon and Worms World Party later on towards the late 90s and early 2000s, the Worms games went through more of a cartoony style approach that would then go on into 3D iterations later on, where you would get to learn more about the characteristics of the Worms characters themselves, and that's what made them so iconic. But it all started with the original game, and it's easy to see why. It's still considered one of the most popular games, or one of the most popular strategy games ever in existence, that spawned, like say, many different sequels, but also was the influence behind many other carbon copies or clone style games that were also released on many of these systems over the years as well. So that will tell you the influence that the Worms games have really had over the years, and it's still as popular today as it's ever been. And the first 3 games have recently been released on the PlayStation Plus Premium catalogue. So now is the perfect time to go back and revisit these earlier games in all of their glory, especially starting off with the first game, just to see what it's like, and then gradually to see the evolution of the further sequels in the franchise. Now, while Worms is a very addictive game, if you were to play it for your first time back in the day, it can be quite intimidating in terms of its menu systems and trying to figure out what to do. It's only with later iterations that it became a lot simpler and more visually appealing to figure out where to find different options and to utilise weapons. The first game still hadn't refined that, but it didn't stop it from being one of the most popular games of its time, but it just evolved with each iteration as it moved forward. If you're into turn-based strategy games, you won't go wrong with the Worms series, but it is interesting to go back and to revisit its first iteration in all its glory, just to see how it plays out and how it compares to other games that you would play later on in the game's long and fun-filled history. But it'd be interesting to know your thoughts of Worms for the PlayStation, or which console or computer did you manage to play it on back in the day? Did you play it on the original PlayStation, or did you play it on many of the other consoles that I mentioned, or even did you play it originally on the Amiga? It'll be interesting to hear your thoughts of this game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around other types of strategy games that were also released on the PS1, then you can check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.